So pity the person who has to follow a Zine. Oh, that's me. Brilliant. Fantastic. I'm going to leave this question just kind of floating slightly in the air for you here while I go on. I'm standing right in front of you here, in front of a massive picture of myself about 10 minutes after I gave birth to my first daughter, Rose, and I'm about to tell you that I hate the word mother. I mean, well, maybe hate is a bit of a strong word. I don't like it. It's nothing to do with the fact of being a mum. I adore my children. I don't think I've ever loved or laughed as much as I do with them. But there's something about the word mother that makes me feel slightly uncomfortable. There's a kind of generic identity that's conferred on me by using the word. I'm suddenly a generic woman with generic needs and wants. But I'm wrong, surely. I mean, 2018 has never been a better time to be a mother, right? We have some of the most amazing role models in our lives in front of us. Serena Williams, Scummy Mummy, Selfish Mother, Michelle Kennedy from Peanut, Mother of Daughters. These women showing us that not only is motherhood fantastic and empowering, you can make money directly out of it from your profile on Instagram, you can make apps for women. It's kind of amazing, right? We've got this amazing place to be. Motherhood, the hashtag on Instagram, has 12 million posts. This is our way to connect with one another. We're constantly able to share our fears and our worries. 2018, you want to write a book about being a mother? This is the year to do it. There's been something like 30 in this year. Fiction, non-fiction, essays, how to birth a baby correctly. This is the time to do it. And fashion, the industry I've worked in for 6 years. For 3 years, deputy editor of Elle, and 3 years when I was editor of Grazia for 3 years. Being a mother is in. I mean, look at that. You know, they've even got matching baby carriers that you can wear with your amazing jumpsuit. You know, this is great. Being a mother is amazing. And actually, I'm joking, but don't underestimate the impact of fashion, because fashion can make things that were seemingly kind of a bit rubbish and nothing really cool and empowering. So we are constantly being sold this message that being a mother this is the time to do it, and this is what we should be priding ourselves on. So why am I standing here right now telling you that this isn't a good thing? Why am I uncomfortable with the idea of motherhood? Well, I'm here because the more I think about it, the more this world that we're in of mothers and motherhood, we're talking to one another. I'm here in this community. I've got these amazing women who are showcasing all these things to me, but they're showcasing them exclusively to women. You know, when actually is motherhood, the fetishization of it, the obsession we have with motherhood, simply a smokescreen for the fact that we still face so many inequalities on a daily basis. The gender pay gap is not closing anytime soon. There's very few women in senior positions. And when you think about if we do work, the domestic inequality, even if we don't, we still shoulder huge amounts of the burden in our lives at home. We've set up these incredible businesses from our kitchen tables, but is that because we haven't really been able to do that in the workplace? And we've turned dress like a mum, the hashtag, into a cool thing because, you know, that's the niche we've been placed into, and let's make the most of it. But really, is it time, this unstoppable trend, we sent it out of fashion? Now, before I continue, I'm fully aware that kind of consigning motherhood to the bin is not exactly a popular, potentially quite a provocative thing. You know, becoming a mother is really quite an emotive and powerful experience. You know, there will be women in this room who have longed to become a mother and haven't become one. There will be people who've tried for a very long time and finally did become one, and the word is very powerful. You know, we all love our children. And there are people who do this for their job every day. They don't want to be made to feel terrible about it, and that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to ask the question, if we're really, really honest, is motherhood obscuring the fact that we've been forced out of the wider world? We've made this brilliant, powerful, amazing world because we haven't really got a place in it. We've turned the corner we've been placed into a palace, but it's still a corner, and we're still in it. Before I continue, I want to talk a little bit about the power of words. As a journalist, they kind of matter to me, and when I was doing a lot of the research for this talk, I started to think about what are the words we associate with mother? And I'm aware that obviously in Brighton itself, in this city, it's a very diverse area. You know, I'm not just, there are people who've become parents in very different ways, but I want to talk about the kind of bigger impact of words in society. So some of the people I spoke to, they talk about doing it all, hero, juggler, stressed, winging it. You can even wear the word winging it on your T-shirt if you want to, or your jumper. These are kind of cliched words, but they are words that we use about mums. And then I thought about what happens when you talk about dads. They're completely different words. They're cliched, but they're there. Cool, hardworking, breadwinner, provider, entertainer, dependable, weekend. Here in Brighton, it might well be that we Lots of you here have shared parental leave, but I can tell you that you are in I think it's less than 2% of people in the country who take it up. So the wider society kind of puts us into these boxes. Now, these words are silly words, but they show you what culture predefines us as. They are cliches, but this is the wider description of mothers and fathers and parents and partners. And the words might seem like nothing, but I know as a writer and editor, they have an ability to shape and change our culture. Even if we don't mean to, we accidentally, or society makes us into the words that seek to define us. So why am I here today doing this talk with you? A year ago, I wrote a piece for the Times. There I am, looking slightly more glamorous than when I gave birth to my child. Delight. And also the Time magazine piece that came out in America not long after mine. I wrote this piece about the conspiracy of silence around childbirth. Now, we regularly don't talk to women about what happens in childbirth. And when I wrote this piece, and I'd had a very challenging journey myself into motherhood, it was not what I expected, I was inundated with thousands of letters from women who had experienced the same very unexpectedly traumatic birth that I had. And I began to wonder whether this conspiracy of silence is really damaging for us as humans, as women, how we're going to process all of this terrible impact that's had on us. I mean, it sounds awful, but having a child is amazing, but the birth is pretty horrific often. Not all the time, but it's not exactly a delightful experience. And I originally came here thinking I was going to just talk simply about that, about the impact that childbirth and the silence around it has on women. But the more women I spoke to, and I spoke to hundreds out of the thousands who'd written to me, I started to wonder if something much more damaging was going on, because not only do we perhaps need motherhood to be so amazing, because our first experiences of it can be tinged with trauma. We need motherhood because the decisions start being made for us. The minute we get pregnant, we are told, what we should or shouldn't find out about during the birth. We're kind of dictated to the kind of birth that we should be having. We are told who should be caring for our children. There's an expectation that the minute you become a mother, you're going to want to be there for your children, and often you do. But what happens if that's not what you want? We were once women before we had our pregnancies, and suddenly all our decisions start being made for us. We needed to make motherhood happen because we'd stopped being treated equally in the same way as men. So I started to look at this idea of what motherhood meant and why we were fixating on it so much. And I suppose, want to tell you my story a little bit that should indicate and hopefully explain why I think this is such an important topic and why motherhood probably is something we need to move on from. So here I am again. This lovely, delightful picture now. Embarrassingly enough, I've actually never shown this picture to anyone before. Here I am doing it at TED. Brilliant. I hate this picture with such a deep passion, and it's embarrassing to admit why. At the time I was deputy editor of Elle. This is absolutely not the image of myself that I had imagined after having a baby. But the reason is because this is not the image of birth that I had been sold by society, by culture, by our obsession with fetishizing every celebrity and royal's pregnancies. Imagine what it must be like to, go through everything, your pregnancy being documented, and then you've got to put a public face on and walk out. Well, this was absolutely not the experience I had, and suddenly there I was having to go out, see my friends and family with my public face, and I didn't want to be seen by anybody because I was so deeply shocked. And I fixated on the ugliness of this image and my ugliness because my experience of birth had felt so ugly to me. The sad thing is, what I had experienced was not unique in the slightest. I had a 33-hour labour. I was shoved in a room with a chair and no bed for about 17 hours. I had forceps that took 3 goes to take her out. You can imagine what that does to somebody. The birth itself was pretty unpleasant. But what happened afterwards was also I bled. I hadn't been told I would bleed for like a month. I was swollen. I had stitches down below. I sneezed and, it wasn't so fun. No one tells you that when you give birth. But I was really deeply, deeply traumatized by it. And the whole experience of becoming a mother had felt very damaging. And I kept thinking to myself, why is it, the sad thing is that it's a shock to us all, because surely you should be preparing women for this massive experience that they're going through. It might go brilliantly, but if it doesn't, why aren't we being told and prepared for how we need to process the information afterwards? So the word mother to me, I thought, if this is what becoming a mother is, I love my child to pieces, but if this is what becoming a mother is, I felt I'd been failed, by culture, by NCT, by the doctors and nurses, by the information that we're not told. And I thought, actually, very sadly thought I'd failed myself because I hadn't gone out and sought the information that I was supposed to. I hadn't armed myself with information. I'd allowed myself to believe that it's totally fine to go into childbirth knowing absolutely nothing about what was going to happen to me afterwards. It sounds bonkers at the time, but the sad thing was the impact that then had on the rest of my life. So I threw myself back into work. I didn't really want to tackle what had happened to me. I was put in denial. I put myself completely into denial. Went back to work after 6 months. I got a massive new job as editor of Grazia after a year. But I was kind of raging inside. I was kind of raging at the fact that no one had told me. I was raging at the fact that as a woman, I was kind of having to suddenly have it all. Yes, I suppose people, you want it all. I spoke to some really amazing women in the process of this talk. I'll just leave that quote up behind you, but it felt like I had to have it all if I wanted to work, in the same way that perhaps my partner, the men or the partners don't have to. You're not expected or condoned necessarily as a partner of asking for flexible time. It's dictated for you as a woman, potentially, that you are going to want to do everything rather than share everything. So I felt that women were being set up to fail because they had to have it all rather than share it all. So I felt deeply passionate about speaking up. I felt that we absolutely had to have our voices heard, and we absolutely had to tell people the truth about what was happening in birth. And so I wrote my piece, and thousands of women replied, and thousands of women, started to share their stories, and all these movements like Make Birth Better and various other online portals started gathering women together to share the truth and talk about a different way of giving birth. And then this happened. Mumsnet is driving fear of childbirth, expert warns. So we start speaking up, and suddenly society again decides what we should or shouldn't say as women. And actually, so they're going, this is the expert. If you go into Mumsnet forums, women are telling stories about childbirth, and I think that can be difficult to deal with. Or poor, weak women, unable to cope with what's going to happen to them next. Mumsnet replies, one of the most common complaints we see on this topic is, why on earth didn't anyone tell me the truth about how bad it could be? So we know what happened to us, and everyone else thinks that what we know is not correct. So I began to understand why it became so important to make motherhood into something really powerful. Motherhood is our saviour, it's our lifeline, it's our place to share our voices, to speak to other women, to be heard. And you know what, screw everything else that's going on. We're not going to be accepted in the workplace. They're going to make it really difficult for us. They're going to tell us how we're going to live our lives. Let's go and live our lives over there in that place. But like I said, it's a little corner and we're living in it. So I have a complicated relationship with the word motherhood and mother. I wouldn't be here today talking to you about this if I hadn't been able to have that motherhood voice, if I hadn't been able to step into that sphere, if I hadn't had the support of all the women who wrote to me after I wrote my piece saying, thank God somebody is finally saying it. But on the other hand, that's what's holding us back, because we need to break out of this echo chamber. Motherhood has taken us to where we are. But parenting happens in so many different ways these days. There are so many varied ways to have children: adoption, surrogacy, you name it, there's ways to become a parent these days, and that is so important. And it's not motherhood that's our next chapter, it's parenthood. And it might seem like a very small thing and a very tiny little word. But we will always, as women who have children, become mothers. And it's time now we insist on becoming parents.